Um, where's New Zealand headed now? Where is it going? So it's a question. It's a question I've been talking with a friend today on the phone about, and we get out of bed and we sort of sometimes wish we could do something a little bit worthwhile. And I've tried to talk about this business of where New Zealand's going for a while now, and today I came across this thing, and I'm reading a book of old articles from Life magazine, and there's one here by Henry Luce, Henry R. Luce, Luce, and so this is him here, and I think he's an editor of Time magazine or Life magazine, but he used to run a lot of various media. Media, they call him a media mogul. But anyway, so I read what he had written here, and it's a longish article, but there was just one part of it that kind of jumped out at me because it's really felt like it was about us. I'm going to read it, and I'm not that great at reading this sort of thing, but I'll give it a go. It'll be patchy because of my eyes as well. But he says it starts out. This is I'm well into this thing in here, but he says even beyond this necessity for living with our own misdeeds, there is another reason why there is no peace in our hearts. It is that we have not been honest with ourselves. As New Zealand, we're not being honest with ourselves, and he's written this in 1941. In this whole matter of war and peace especially, we have been at various times and in various ways false to ourselves, false to each other, false to the facts of history, and false to the future. Good God, I can't believe this sums New Zealand up so well. I'll read it again. In this whole matter of war and peace, if we can characterise the relationship between Maoris and Europeans in that way, we have been at various times and in various ways false to ourselves. We have. False to each other. We have. False to the facts of history and false to the future. We are not looking at what's going to be the outcome of all this. We just refuse to look at it. We're all living with our heads up our asses, to go on with Henry Luce. In this self-deceit, our political leaders of all shades of opinion are deeply implicated. Good Lord, is that not true? Yet we cannot shove the blame off on them. Well, we can't because, we put them there. If our leaders have deceived us, it is mainly because we ourselves have insisted on being deceived. Good Lord, think about what he's saying. We ourselves have insisted on being deceived. That's us all day long in New Zealand. That's what we're doing. Their deceitfulness has resulted from our own moral and intellectual confusion. Ain't that true? In this confusion, our educators and churchmen and scientists are deeply, deeply implicated. They just are. They just are. They're in it donkey deep in a deception and a refusal to recognise realities in New Zealand. Journalists, he says, journalists too, of course, are implicated. Well, of course they are. They're at the forefront of all this today, because the media has become so powerful. But if Americans are confused, it is not for lack of accurate and pertinent information. Now, what he's talking about here is whether or not they should enter World War II, and this is before Pearl Harbor. The American people are by far the best informed people in the history of the world. Well, New Zealanders should be amongst the best informed in the world because we've got the benefit of international media, and we've got libraries, and we've got the internet. We've got to stop looking at stupid things and try and figure out what the hell's going on in our country. The trouble, he says, is not with the facts. The trouble is that clear and honest inferences have not been drawn from the facts. Think about that. The trouble is not with the facts. The trouble is that clear and honest inference have not been drawn from the facts. We're not listening to what is in front of our faces, people. And this is a man writing about World War II in 1941. This is a human thing. People just lie to themselves and look the other way. The day-to-day present is clear. The issues of tomorrow are befogged. Will only be befogged because people refuse to see them. And he says there is one fundamental issue which faces America as it faces no other nation. It is the issue peculiar to America and peculiar to America in the 20th century. That is now. The problem between Europeans and Maori in New Zealand is peculiar to New Zealand. It is our problem. It is up to us to find a way past it. It is up to us, both sides, to find a way through it. It is us to try and make sense of it. And the first thing we have to do is tell the bloody truth. Because we lie about what Maori life was like before we come here. And that we live on the lie that colonialism ruined Maori culture. Not true. It is deeper ever than the immediate issue of war. If America meets it correctly, then, despite a host of dangers and difficulties, we can look forward and move forward to a future worthy of men, with peace in our hearts. If we dodge the issue, we shall founder for 10 or 20 or 30 bitter years in chartless and meaningless series of disasters. It's like reading something that's, for me, as I read it this morning, I just thought, good Lord, what a wise man. But, these days we would hate him. Why? Because he was rich. But, he was rich because he wasn't stupid. And he can write like that, so, So without my commentary sort of shoved into it, it's very telling, I think. And we are, New Zealand is deluded. New Zealand's living in a world of delusion. The first and most egregious lie that we live by is the great big lie about how European settlement or Europeans coming to New Zealand were just another race of people who came over and took away an idyllic Maori lifestyle. Well, they weren't just another race of people. They represented global civilization that we have today. The Europeans who arrived here on sailing ships were the forerunners of civilization. They were bringing the global civilization at the time. And what a lot of people fail to recognize and refuse to see is that Maori, when they arrived, a lot of Maori, many Maori signed up to the idea that Europeanism, if you want to call it that, colonialism, was going to bring them into the future. Because without us, people can delude themselves if they want, but without us, how would Maori have ever made their way into the great global civilization, of which every country in the world wants to be a part? I always look at this and say, when people grizzle about colonialization, the thought that always goes through my head is, what if it hadn't happened? What if nobody came here and found the Maoris? What if nobody brought modern civilization to the Maoris? Were they ever going to develop it themselves? Of course not. They hadn't. When we got here, they hadn't even developed the bloody bow and arrow. They were living very difficult lives in a temperate climate as people who had come from a much warmer climate, and they're trying to get by without tools, without clothes, without ceramics. Life was tough. And they did eat each other, and they did engage in tribal wars all the time. Because, tribal wars, they took slaves. Slavery was part of the deal. That Maori culture that they tell us was so wonderful before we came here was cannibalism, tribal wars, resulting in slavery and more cannibalism. just was. And when they weren't eating other people, they were having to eat rats and birds. And, you know, they just, it was just a reality. There was no big animals here, only birds. There was no cows, no sheep, no goats, no horses, no deer. None of those animals were here. We bought them all. We bought them all with the civilization, and with that came clothing to keep them warm. You know, the methods for making proper buildings. They were living in grass huts. They just were. You know, we bought tools. We taught them all that. You know, most Maoris were falling over themselves to learn how to use that sort of stuff and become part of the civilization. And, you know, the people today are not doing them justice. Those people back then, those very primitive people who looked up, saw what was happening, decided to jump on board and take their people, that is the people who are here now, into the civilization, should be honoured for what they did. Not honoured for what some radical bloody Maori or university idiot with a ticky hanging around his neck, white people mostly, not honoured for what they think. They do not acknowledge the reality, and the reality is that Maori back in the day, they wanted, what did they want? All these people came here with all this stuff, all this modern stuff, tools, clothes, pots and pans, dishes, ceramics, things to put water in, everything, blankets to keep warm, shoes to, with the capability of repairing a broken bone. They came here with all that stuff, a proper health, European health arrangements, as bad as they were at the time, were eons ahead of what the Maori were able to do. And why can't we just own up to that? Well, because as long as we tell lies about it, once you start teaching the children lies, the children believe it. What did Hitler do? Hitler taught lies to the children. That was where he started. And that's what Jacinda Ardern and Mahuta and these people are doing now. They are changing the curriculum to be able to teach lies to your children. And if you want to learn a little bit about the beginnings of fascism and Nazism in Europe, if you want to see the genesis of it, go and have a proper look and you will recognise what's going on in New Zealand schools today. People have to wake up. And so like that man says, it's all very well sitting on the fence. Basically, that's what he's saying. It's all very well knowing about what's going on, but it's a waste of time knowing if you're not going to do anything about it. So people, got to figure out what you're going to do. I'm not suggesting a civil war, but I am suggesting the first place we have to start with these people is the government. We've got to change the government. And we need to do that, by the established way. It's a democracy. Look after the democracy. Get rid of the government. They're trying to kill the democracy. Get rid of them. And the next thing you have to do, and no choice, you've got to do it, you've got to gut the media. Really. New Zealand has got no choice but to gut the media. The media are running the lies. They just are. Every time they call New Zealand Aotearoa, they're running the lie. They just are. Nobody wants the name changed, only those idiots. They need to go. After the new government comes in, and we've got to keep them under control too. We've got to make sure the National Party, when it wins, listens. For me, I'm going to vote for the ACT guy. He'll at least give it a go. But, we've got to insist that National does it properly. All this bullshit's got to stop. Got to stop right now. Got to stop at the next election. And what that means is that the media who have been telling flat out lies and changing the history and changing, the propaganda and the brainwashing that comes through our bloody televised media is astonishing, all the way through to the advertising. And the corporates, the big corporates who have jumped on board with that, they need a spanking as well. Hold them back. Hold them to account. Just make sure but the first thing you've got to do is sort the media out. The media needs a gutting. like 90% of the people in there need to be gone. Keep them long enough to teach you how to work the machinery and get rid of them, the lot of them. And that means the board and all the presenters and all the journalists have all got to go. They've either got to go or they've got to be re-educated back to the principles of democracy. And democracy means telling the whole story, not just one side. Media, you're at fault. You've got to go. That's all of you. And, you could start with that Weasley prick on TV1 News. What's his name? Simon Dello. He could go. What a bloody creepy little bastard he is. And on that note, I'm in a good mood. But you wouldn't think so, would you? So I'm going to stop this if I can and go and have a look. And then I'll stick it on my YouTube channel. Because I can. Because I'm my own little broadcaster. And this is my studio.